it looks like since the end of 2019, the world is falling on its head and walking upside down. There's a lot of ugly things, there's a lot of bad things, and we're still desperately looking for some good things. However, is it only since the end of 2019 that the world is really walking upside down? Or are we just hitting a plateau? And no, for those of you who think that I could be into conspiracy theory, this is not the point of this presentation. It's rather more to think about the fact that a lot of things have been going pear-shaped, and we have most of the time totally decided to ignore it. Today, we are faced with a situation where nobody anywhere on the planet can ignore the fact that something is not happening the way it should, and we are faced with difficulties that we never thought we would have to. This presentation is really about how to rise from the ashes of adversity triumphantly. And towards the end of this presentation, we will be talking about something incredibly positive that you can be doing during this time. Today, worldwide, we have fear, we have chaos, we have panic. The fear comes from the fact that we have a so-called invisible enemy, which is literally taking the world by storm. And because it is invisible, most people don't believe in its existence. And because of not believing in its existence, we haven't really kind of cared very much about it at the time where we should have done, when things really starting to go bad in China. And therefore, we have let things happen which could have been an awful lot less worse than they are today. So we have chaos. We have chaos because the whole economy, because the whole of the people, everybody on the planet cannot ignore any longer that something is going wrong. Because of that, we also have panic, because people just do not understand why their lives is being turned upside down. And they see an enormous amount of negativity in the fact that they are being, at the time of my recording this, locked up in various positions. They cannot go about their activity. They're worried about their future. The whole picture of how things used to be has literally disappeared. And it was only there a few months back. So it's how quickly things can change, which has taken everybody by surprise. But should that really have been such a surprise? Wasn't there any warning signals that kept on saying, hey, the way we're doing things is probably not the smartest on the planet. Hey, the way we're doing things, we're actually literally suffocating ourselves. Let's look at pollution, for example. Hey, the way we're doing things is bringing us to the brink of collapse, because we are destroying the environment at such a rate as if there is no tomorrow. And as I often say, the way we're going about it, we are certainly going to be having no tomorrow if we carry on like this. There is frustration. Frustrations because we can't have it our way, because we can't just doodle around the way we have done. And it's not that people have not tried to say, hey, as I said, something is we're pushing it too far. The globalization that we're experiencing is maybe bringing some good things, but all in all, it's not at all positive. There is anger because exactly that, we're frustrated. Somebody should have taken care of that, It's incomprehension, and it's a blame game about the real root causes of all this mess and chaos, which is literally holding the whole planet's population as hostage today without any knowledge of what's going to happen. It's incredible, actually, that it takes a 400 to 500 micron virus, just a tiny little thing that is invisible with the naked eye, which is running amok worldwide and is devastating the human population, to put everything to a halt, where many very eminent people, scientists and everything else had already warned that we were playing with fire. And finally, it's the tiniest of things which is forcing people to stop and revisit what's happening to the planet, happening to their life, happening to the way they've decided to run their communication, their their meaning or lack of it, etc., as we're going to be looking at. This panic is definitely existing, but there is no analysis of the deep root causes of this panic. We think it's coming from an invisible virus. But what's caused the invisible virus to exist in the first place? Does it come from a poor little pangolin somewhere? Well, some people may decide to believe it, but, it could be a little kind of light-hearted to just believe that a pangolin could have created that amount of chaos all across the planet. And because we're not actually analyzing what the deep root causes are, in other words, even if it comes from an animal, would it be sufficient to create such chaos? Because if it had stayed in Wuhan, then there wouldn't be any trouble in the rest of the world. Unfortunately, it moved from Wuhan rather rapidly everywhere else. Nobody saw it coming. Nobody actually paid any attention, even though we knew what the consequences would be. Because we are not really looking at what's going on, we are certainly missing much better solutions to the problems of the planet and our own lives on it and our cohabitation with other beings than we could actually expect from something called Homo sapiens sapiens. I think the sapiens is probably a little too much. However, what are the lessons that we can take from this happening? We certainly have an awful lot of time in front of us to think about it. At the time when I'm recording this, although this was a program which I had created in the autumn of last year, and I'm just slightly modifying it in order to be more accurate with the time, what lessons can we take from what is happening? There is an escaped virus from China. Well, whether it originated in China or not is not the matter, but it's swamping the world so rapidly. So what does it mean? What are we actually looking at which we're missing, therefore we're not applying the lessons to? Well, there is some common sense. There is some common sense missing, because if we did analyze the fact that we have worldwide communications, people move with planes all over the place, or they used to up till fairly frequently, then we would certainly have taken a little bit more care. And some countries have actually tried to take a little bit more care, even though they were very close to China. Let's take Taiwan, for example. So it's not like it was impossible to forecast, and it's not like it was impossible to take any precautions about it. So this is only but one example that we cannot miss, but there are enormous amount of other examples which span across the whole of the environmental questions that we're ignoring. We're thinking about climate change, or at least that was, the thing that everybody was talking about last year. But it's not just climate change. It's a fact that we are leading a certain type of life. We are not seeing that in the root causes of what creates the chaos we have today, whether it is with a virus, whether it is with a climate, because climate still is a problem. Whether one believes that it's a normal change or it's not a normal change, there are wild fluctuations which are indicating that something is afoot, whatever it is. But in all those root causes, we fail to see the solutions, because if we looked at the root causes, then obviously you're going to start looking at the intersections of what creates troubles. It's possible, first of all, because of the consequences of globalization. We have tentacular consequences. There is not only the fact that it's creating an enormous amount of pollution that's everywhere, but there is a loss of the local roots. There is a loss of the infrastructure in local area which can take care of basic needs, because we've suddenly decided that we were going to forget everything we knew, whatever the people is, whatever their crafts were, whatever their know-how was, and we were going to become dependent on faraway solutions, which appeared to be cheaper, although at the end of the day, obviously we are seeing they were not, and they were creating for an enormous loss of skills and at the same time huge movements of goods. Loss of skills actually means loss of activities. All the people who used to be busy doing things in their local communities, in their local area, which was serving a group of people which didn't need to be stretched on the other side of the Pacific or the Atlantic, means that these people had to find other activities or they became unemployed. But in any case, the skills are getting lost if they're not totally lost or either. They were really incredibly meaningful to each community because if you cast your memory back a few decades, there were areas which were specialized in something or other. They were specialized in some kind of agriculture. They were specialized in some kinds. I'm thinking about a French example where people used to make shoes. Everybody knew how to make shoes in the north or the central west part of France and in the Pyrenees. This has been totally lost because everything is coming from China. In any case, a loss of the local know-how and therefore an incredible dependence on what's happening. The fact that we are moving things about at such huge distances definitely means an enormous environmental consequence. You have container ships, which are the biggest polluter on the planet, which used to crisscross the oceans ad nauseum. An enormous amount of stuff that people would simply throw away the moment they bought it on the other side at their destination. And not only that, but it used to carry, and it probably still does today, foreign, highly invasive flora and fauna. Think about the Strait of Panama, which linked the Pacific with the Atlantic, and the enormous trouble that both local ecosystems are getting from having species which have nothing to do with each other, which are suddenly being mixed. And it's not only that, we had the same situation in the Middle East. We have the same situation when containers are arriving from the other side of the world and you get invasive species which are coming to destroy the local population. We have created all this, but we are not really paying any attention to this because we are so caught up into this, let's rush to get something else. Of course, because in the local areas, which is not a degrading term, it's on the contrary a very, very powerful term, but in the local area, because these activities have been lost to foreign powers, you have had to witness a desertification of the rural areas with slower lifestyles, and a massive move towards urban areas, which have created in themselves a new set of difficulties. And like we're talking back towards the end of the 18th century, but it's only accelerated. It looks as if people in the rural areas are looked down, the population who has not made it to the town, which is absolute nonsense. And there is a sharpening divide between the manual and the intellectual. Intellectuals supposed to be, kind of going into towns, and the manuals are supposed to be, the idiots who couldn't move away from their ancestral lands and are still making asparagus and strawberries grow. So there is a level of intellectualism which is totally out of space because having a high level of intellectual activity certainly doesn't mean disdaining manual skills like what we are doing today. So we're moving in an era where everything is becoming dematerialized, where we have no more connections with reality. We spend our time creating wealth in inverted comma, which is not visible because it's just numbers which are traded up and down. And people are spending whole lives, people are spending whole careers, people committing suicide or jumping up and down just because something which doesn't exist has been multiplied overnight or in a matter of a few hours. There is a total craziness about the way we are conducting our lives, which was bound to come to a halt at some stage, and it certainly has done it in a very vivid way, because nobody can say, well, I'm going to escape somewhere else. There's nowhere to escape. When this movement there towards the towns, towards intellectual jobs, but not in a positive sense, in a more dematerialized, removed from reality happened, then you got again the societal collapse. The unit, the family fell apart. People don't live with each other anymore in the so-called developed world. We store our elders in houses just to wait for them to die. They are a pain in the butts. Before, you used to have several generations living with each other. There were some very strong bonds which were enabling the wisdom acquired by one generation to be passed on to the next without having to be told at school. So there's a whole mixing pot, which on one hand is very nice, but on the other hand means that there is a disconnection from roots, and we know from enough studies that disconnecting from your roots is a recipe for disasters. The communities were destroyed, but they were not rebuilt. They were not built anywhere else. People moved to areas, but they are isolated. Ended up happening is that instead of working, because one had a meaning, one had a love, one had a passion for what one's doing, we've turned work into a survival marathon. The meaning of what we are doing is totally lost, because most people, for example, 70% of people in the States says they don't like what they're doing because they don't feel any connection to it. And it's not only in the States, it's more or less everywhere on the planet getting in these directions. When you destroy bonds, you have with the outside, when you destroy bonds with your family, with your community, when you are living in perfect isolation, and that's not the isolation that you're being forced into today, your basic knowledge is also destroyed, and in particular, the basic health know-how is being destroyed. And one has scoffed a lot about recipes and ways of life that mothers and grandmothers have passed to their children in the course of the years and the decades and the centuries. However, we have got to the stage where we're supposed to be served by medicine, maybe, although I'm slightly kind of not really in sync with that thing. We have lost the know-how about how to eat. Eating today, whether it's in the States or in Europe or anywhere else, is becoming a huge nonsense. Everything that we're eating has nothing to do with natural ingredients, which is now becoming fashionable, but it's not affordable by everybody. Most of our kids are overweight, more of our people are overweight, our elders are getting Alzheimer's, our elders, they may live a few years longer, but they're in total non-communication with the world around them. So is this a good thing? I don't think so. Then we're talking about lifestyle. There's a mindless frenzy. Everybody rushes around. You have to rush, because if you don't rush, you're not in. One doesn't really know why what is rushing, and of course the more you rush, the more you need to rush. So we'll go into a lot of details about this later on. Because the body is so badly fed and the mind is so incredibly overcrowded, then the connection between the body and the mind is lost. There is you don't even know how your body functions. Most of the children today, even if they do medical school, they will know some stuff, but they don't actually understand the meaning of having some food which is coming from the ground or from the water or which is being grown, and that they ingest, and what is a consequence of these ingestions, not only on their health, on their physical health, but also on their mental health. There is a total loss of meaning, loss of knowledge in that field, which is costing us very dear today, because we don't know what's going on with this 400 microns little thing, which is creating havoc. So we have to rely on experts, we're told. Okay, so experts, everywhere you turn, there is an expert in something. There's even experts on experts. It's hilarious or not. But these experts really aren't experts. This is a plague of dissecting things more and losing the overall vision of who we are, where we are, how we are connected with each other, and with this planet, because there is no plan B, as somebody much more famous than I am once said. There is no plan B. So if we don't understand where we are and how we're connected with the world, then you can dissect things until the cows come home, but you're not going to have any connection. So we have the plague of disconnection, disconnections from ourselves and disconnections from our environment. And yet, humans are not living in total isolation. They're not. We are part of ecosystems that we are destroying with the greatest speed, as if, our lives depending on it. Well, our lives depend on the ecosystem, not on their destructions, but we don't seem to get it. We have these crazy lifestyles that means that we need to burn more oil, burn more coal, burn more nuclear, burn more whatever it is to acquire things that we're going to be throwing away a few minutes later. And we're even destroying our guts. We're destroying the living organisms in our guts, and we're also destroying anything around it. Old forest, wetlands, oceans, skies, weather, you name it, we are on a destructive path. And what's happening today is a little bit like turning the pedal back towards us. We are actually forced to see what's happening when you destroy something. Disconnection is the key to today's ills, because when we're disconnected, we can't think. And when we can't think, we don't analyze. When we don't analyze, we don't change things and we don't make it different. We have a lack of reflection and we have a lack of analysis. It leads to change. There is a loss of focus. We can't think more than 2 seconds on a subject without being distracted by something, another thought, social media, a phone call, something which you think has to be done yesterday. And so we can't actually stop and think. There are no thinkers anymore. There are no philosophers anymore. There are people who pretend to be thinking, but they don't analyze. They just repeat like parrots whatever somebody else has said. But who are the people who are astute enough to look at the whole chains of what's going on? We will be looking in the program that I'm going to be talking about later on. We have French philosopher here who has demonstrated that many of the things that are happening today are coming from the fact that we can't connect events with each other anymore. We can just about see one event, but we can't see that if you drown your field with glyphosate, then the food that you're going to get is going to be polluted. If you eat polluted food, you're going to be sick. And if you are sick, you are going to be incapable of doing meaningful and purposeful activities because your body and your mind are being destroyed. But this is only just one example. The fact that we are pushed into getting on one side or the other means that we are pushed into polarizing. Whether it's in politics, whether it's in ideas, you have to decide which camp you are in, because if you're not for me, you're against me, which makes absolutely zero sense. Not everything is binary in life. This polarization is only able to take place because education has lost the basics. How many children are getting to the stage of getting into universities, of starting a higher education, who still don't know how to write? In any case, handwriting is obsolete apparently, although it's very well proven that your analysis and your focus abilities are depending on the coordinations between your handwriting and your eyes and your brain. Most people don't read. We listen to podcasts, we watch videos. But who now reads full books several times in the week? What kind of books are we reading, even when we do? How much are we absorbing from it? And that's, again, is a whole subject that I will be talking about, because this time of isolation that is being forced upon us is giving us tremendous opportunities to get back to the basics. Arithmetics, calculus, all the basic things which enable us to understand how the world goes round is removed from our curriculum, as if we wanted to make children stupid from day one. The key to individual freedom to learn is mostly lost. And again, the reason why I called this presentation The World Upside Down, from the ugly to the bad to the good, is because for once we can't rush anywhere. There is nowhere to rush. You're stuck. Even if you're stuck in 70 square meters with 6 people in it, you are stuck. So take advantage of it to think, because you are probably going to get a better ability to do that. Use your brain and reflect upon those ideas. And this is a whole idea about this program, is not to waste your time, not to flitter away, not to get excited, not to get angry, not to get excited, not to play games with blame games with everybody else. It's about getting your key to individual freedom to learn back and to use it. Everybody's talking about wars. We're in war. We're in a war with this virus. We're in a war with the epidemics. We're in war. I mean, it looks as if the greatest armies in the countries on the world were at war against a 400 microns virus. It's nearly hilarious, but it's not, because people are dying. But that is my personal war, is neoliberalism. Everything is allowed. You can do anything you want. I mean, because you are human and you have the liberty to think, to do, etc., etc. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like this in the world. If you take a knife and cut your finger, maybe you can do it, but is this really advisable? I don't think so. Yet we take knives and we cut our fingers, we cut the fingers of our neighbors, of the environment, figuratively speaking, hopefully, I hope, but we keep on doing that. So neoliberalism is a load of bunkers. They may have had good intentions, maybe we were trying to correct this and that, but the consequences are disastrous, because instead of getting deeper in understanding and solving, we lost the plot in total meaninglessness. We lost the plot in trying to analyze the analysis of the analysis, etc. It became paralysis via analysis, and it led to this total polarization. If you don't agree with me, you are against me. No, if I don't agree with you, I'm having a courteous, intelligent, genuinely seeking to understand your point of view, and you are trying to understand mine, so that we can both come out better out of the conversation than we were before. And this is no longer the case. Now we're just getting drawn into a yogurt pot, which is really, really bad in terms of our ability to survive special circumstances that we have created, like the one we're living today. So what connection with this virus? Well, it's the first one is pretty clear. We're incapable to rise to the occasion. Why? Because we are looking at what's happening, but not understanding how it came about. We didn't take the measures that could have been taken. And we are polarizing the issue. Should we be in? Should we be out? Should we coming up? Should we coming down? But we are not taking an overall view of how all human beings could be working in order to solve this particular problem. Instead of that, instead of looking inwards, everybody is blaming the other. Oh, well, it's China is saying it's because of this. This is saying that's because of that. This is a disastrous habit of blame game which we are playing, and which is reinforced by the circumstances. Instead of getting together and say, okay, what's working? How can we move forward? What medicine is getting the job done? What is it that we need? How do we organize the economy? How are we going to organize people so that everybody understands what the role they can play to bring everything together and start solving the situation? We just keeps on blaming each other. Oh, well, it's because he didn't, and she did, and they, and so it's carelessness. This carelessness leads to bad leaders, whoever they are, whether they are in power or whether they are in wannabe powers. One step further is you need to understand that the first leader that you need to be taking care of is yourself. When we delegate power, consequences happen, because there is a difference between saying please syndicate, put together possibilities that we have, and let's make sure that you're doing whatever it is that we are all agreeing to. And what is happening today, which is, well, you're the leader, go fix it. And whatever he or she does is always going to be wrong, because nobody has taken responsibility in the first place. We are all self-responsible, and if we decide to let something happen, then we are responsible for the consequences of it. There is no wriggling out of that. State is not there to replace our brain. State is not there to replace our mommy or daddy. And if you want the state to replace your mommy and daddy, then you should give up any idea that something is right or wrong. You just gave it up. Please think that the first path in leadership is always with oneself. The first consequence of passing it on to somebody else, as I said, is saying, well, someone else should fix it, whatever this it is. We don't have to think. We're just like sheep going to slaughter. We don't know what the it is, but we want it fixed. How stupid can we be? Let's use the time that we have and start thinking about how the way we are acting, the way we are thinking or not, as the case may be, the way we're making decisions are contributing to the amount of chaos that we have at the moment. We have meaningless races. Education, as I said before, is nonsense. So we rush towards education, we rush towards making as much debt as possible to have a degree which at the end of the day is going to bring us nothing but $250,000 minimum of debt. The Brits have a very interesting, a little bit crude, sorry if you're easily offended, just close your ears for the next 5 seconds, but I think it's actually quite interesting to say thumb in bump and brain in neutral, which means what it says. People cannot imagine how the consequence of what it is that they are learning is going to change the life for themselves or other people. So they end up doing work which have no meaning, no sense. You have highly educated people with masters and people who've studied for years and years and years, and they got filling up shelves in supermarkets. Oh, there is something wrong in our system. Let's fix it. Not somebody fixes it, but we need to think what it is that is wrong and what we need to do about it, what choices we need to do. The inequality is a nonsense. There is no reason to have huge masses of wealth stashed away in vaults in banks that nobody will ever see, just to say that you've got X amounts of zeros after the 2 or 3 on your name. It means nothing. The only thing that is meaningful is what do you do with it? How do you employ whatever wealth you have, whether it is large or small? How do you employ it to make the world we all live in any better? And this is a huge subject which should never degenerate. Oh, they are rich and I'm poor. Well, if they are rich and you're poor, go change it. But what's important is even when you are physically poor, you are most of the time much richer than a lot of loaded people who have lots of money in the bank but don't know what to do with it. So let's find out what it is that you've got and how you can use it and how can you bring about a meaning which is going to be incredibly useful to these times of chaos that we have today. When we kind of are isolating, and I'm not talking about the forced isolations that we are experiencing at the time of this recording. I'm talking about belly button gazing. We're just kind of into our own little world. We are nowadays only fixed into our smartphones, into our tablets, into our non-physical communication. So we are totally ignoring the environment. How many people are eating in families? Well, not that many, but look at how people are eating. They're not eating with other people, they're eating with their smartphones. Hey, guys, there is something wrong here. Let's fix this. And it's not the government that needs to fix it, it's us. It's an awareness that we need to take and fix. Look at what we are doing. We're losing track with ourselves, and therefore we're losing tracks with our basic happiness. Because everything that happens to us seems to be Just that, happening to us. It's not that we make it happen. And then there is a plague of more. We always want more. I mean, more the latest of whatever it is, the latest t-shirt, the latest shoes, the latest job, the latest smartphone, the latest whatever it is. We want more. But there is no infinite growth with finite resources. Hey, guys, we live on planet Earth. Planet Earth is generous, but it has finite resources. And we go about it as if they were infinite. This makes no sense. And right now, we've been forced to stop and think about it, which is a real blessing. Because what really is a meaning of life which is just rushed through and is destructive? The way we are going about things, we're creating wars, we're creating catastrophes, all that we know how to create. But has it got really any meaning? Is there on the other side of the planet somebody who is better or somebody who is worse that we must destroy or incense? No, we are all human beings and we're all stuck in this thing together. The same, and this is what I find so incredibly interesting with the story of this 400 to 500 micron virus. We are all in it together. We can't escape. It's like, you've been put into the mixing bowl and hey guys, you must come out with a cake. And this was exactly the situation before, but somehow we couldn't see it. So getting back to the core question is highly, highly, highly important. What do we want out of life? What do we want to give in life? Where are we at in our lives? I mean, most of us have just been led from one thing to the other, but nothing's really happening with it. How far are we from our dreams? I mean, did we even have the time to dream about something that we wanted to do? Were we able to conduct it? Were we able to go along with it? Have we forgotten about it? Have we given it up? Can we resurrect something out of it? I mean, I know there is a dire death of ventilators, but perhaps this program can put our dreams back onto the resurrection path, because without dreams, life has really very, very little meaning. So catastrophe here is a lever. There's no doubt that pandemic is ugly. There's no doubt that really, really, really bad things are happening. People are dying, people are suffering, people are anxious, people are losing it, people are getting lost, people are totally in chaos. But one thing we must understand is that very good things could emerge from it. And the only difference between things remaining ugly or getting even uglier or turning to good is exactly what we are going to do about it, what we are going to be choosing to do out of these crossroad times. And this is where I thought that it was highly important to create something that would help us go through this period in a sensible and meaningful way. I haven't spoken very much about me because I think that most of the time you get distracted by the person. We are all into this story about gurus, about influencers, about people who are in power. I was extremely lucky to have a life where I constantly chose what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. From an early age, I became interested in natural medicines. I created the first natural medicine clinic in residential in the UK. That was a long, long time ago, right at the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s. So that dates me a little. I was extremely lucky to develop this clinic, have schools, help people get installed and so on. And then I traveled the world to lecture. And finally, I also spent a huge chunk of time, like 12 years, spending time really, really thinking about life and going into retreat. And I will tell you a little bit more about this. But this actually means that isolation is something that I know because I spent a long time in self-chosen isolation in terms of retreats. And I can tell you that what happens in it, not out of reading it into a book, but because I have experienced it myself, on myself, and I know what happens, and I know what are all the emotions that you're going through, whether you're being forced into isolations or whether you're choosing to go through isolations. It's an ugly part of self-isolation, which turn into the bad of breaking habits, because we don't know what habits we have until we're forced to stop and look at what we normally do. And then the good is the fact that once you understand how you function, what makes you tick, what makes you react, how you can move on, once you get a little bit of support, once you are helped to get the bases back into your pocket so you can use them, things that you should have learned from the communities which have been destroyed, from the schools which are not fulfilling their purpose, from studies that we're not doing because we're too much in a hurry to get nowhere fast. This redirection is a real good, a real wealth that is going to be acquired for you whatever else happens in the world. This is how I really created this program. I can honestly say help is really at hand. There is a program with basic steps. There is an introduction to lifestyle. It can really launch you into a new era. This program I call Thrive, how to do better than survive in self-isolation. And this self-isolation needs to be understood not only in the fact that we are forced to isolate today, but in all the meaning and the sense of isolations, whether we were in isolations before because we were not connecting with everybody, because we are choosing to take some time off, even though we may physically be forced to do something, or because simply being forced to stop helps us to see what's really happening in our lives. So I hope you have enjoyed this short presentation. In the next video, I'm going to go through the contents of this program, all these basic steps that you are going to see. And in the next video, you're going to find that there is very specific steps that we can take calmly, happily, and enjoy what is happening instead of literally falling apart in anger and frustrations and isolations and fears and extreme anxieties. There's no need for that. Whatever the outcome is, you will be able to feel that you are in charge, even though you appear not to be, much more than when you thought you were and you were not. Having said that, I'm looking forward to you clicking onto the next video and seeing what I have in store for you and how you can really take hold of this time and make the best of it. Look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you.